you. Hi, I'm Kizzy from Kettle Foods.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
I'm just really interested with your MVP.
Yeah.
Do you think that the benefit statement itself has to be differentiated, or do you think that your benefit can be the same as other things that are out there in the category, as long as the way that you bring it to life is differentiated?
I think it's a bit of both. So depending on where you are, if it's an innovation which is really breakthrough, you're trying to change consumer behavior, that's when your benefit has to be differentiated. But if it's something that you're really trying to bring something that's innovative for the business but not for the market, that's when you want to look at what's the best way of uniquely demonstrating the consumer benefit.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nicole from University of Nottingham. It's a very interesting talk, but I have a question about the number of consumers in your study. So normally, what's the size of it, and how did you decide, and what kind of group they are?
To be honest, we've been also, so while we're trying to implement this, we're still looking at we ourselves in the process, we're doing the MVP kind of thing, if you think about it. But what we have started to do is we're trying to identify where we go with a mix of early adopters and a mix of groups with the smaller focus groups. Early on is more about focus groups because you start to get the in-depth understanding of it. When you go to later on the validation, that's when you go quantitative, where you need to be able to predict volume forecast and really have a more mainstream. Early on is more about getting the right consumer segments, I think, or the right consumer whatever occasions you're going to target the consumers that normally consume products in those occasions. So look at it on what are you trying to what the benefit you're going to try and convey, what you're trying to test, and then decide whether you do your consumer benefit or your occasions around.
Hi, Carol Drury. I'm a patent attorney with Barger Brattel. You're talking about innovation and consumer groups. Too close? And it just makes me a bit nervous. Do you have confidentiality agreements in place for these tests? How do you make sure that everything's kept secret and isn't leaked to the public?
To be honest, as a consumer, when you test these things upfront with consumers haven't seen the whole picture at that point of time to be able to then go and start talking to the other people. But yes, with the agencies we work with, they would have confidentiality in the lines. So, but I have some of the agency people in here who can probably answer this question better than I do.
Okay. We'll take the last question and then we'll move on to the panel who've come here today to talk about Brexit.
Hi, yeah, I'm just following on from the lady at the front here. You say you talk to a lot of panels. How long does that take to complete the sort of the initial stage of the testing? So with the focus groups, what's a typical time period?
I would say easily about 3 to 4 months from the time you know what are the different ideas that you're going through. You would give yourself 3 to 4 months, because early upfront phase is still very, very fuzzy. It's not very clear and direct, so you want to spend more time upfront than doing it later on.
And is that in terms of sort of granulating what demographics that you're looking to target?
I think it's more about how you're going to present the ideas, what different MVPs you're going to present with them, etc. So that's when you're starting from your idea screeners to your MVP and getting some clear brief out of that. You would say easily about 3 to 6 months, plus the additional times you would need to do in contacting with consumers, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move on to the panel session. And I'm going to ask our panel experts, the 4-chair challenge, to just introduce themselves, and then we'll move into a general discussion about Brexit. But if there's anything you want to reference from what you might have heard already today or this morning, then we can do that as well. So, Susan, over to you to start.
Good morning. My name's Susan MacDonald, and I'm Chief of Business Development and Relationships at Global Bright Futures. We work with brands and retailers and supply chain actors to help their businesses become more sustainable.
Good afternoon, it's Nigel Knapp. I'm from the Manufacturing Technology Centre. We help any UK manufacturer become more competitive on the global stage from all sectors, but we have done quite a bit in the food and drink industry.
Hi, I'm David Parkinson. I'm a supply chain and engineering consultant with Royal Haskoning. Royal Haskoning is a consulting engineer based here in the UK and Holland and internationally. And we help our industry clients build and shape their supply chains of the future.
Okay, great stuff. And for those of you that missed me, my name's Dennis Tracy. I'm Chief Safety, Security, Environment and Quality Officer for Pladis Global. We produce across 34 factories in 13 countries, 4 billion consumers, and the challenge for us is to be a global business making McVitie's digestives in 5 different countries with 5 different sets of standards and 5 different belief systems. So always a challenge, and Brexit is no least a challenge for us as it is for anybody else. So let's start. Anyone got any particular questions they want to start off with? So you've all got I'm presuming everyone's got a strategy around Brexit. Has anyone got any questions about any of the topics you've heard about this morning? Sustainability, environmental standards, health and safety, product quality, food safety. Has anyone got any particular challenges that you're facing in your businesses or in your environment that you're working in? Okay. Please, yeah, sure.
So, how many people here are from a food manufacturer? All right, we have a few. And can I ask you, are you busy preparing for Brexit?
Great stuff.
Some? Yeah. But what are you preparing for? I think that's really the big question, right? Is that?
Well, I mean, we don't quite know yet where we're going to end up, but the challenge that we've got at the moment is that the currency's devalued by 50% in Turkey, and we have 7 or 8 manufacturing sites there producing products that we export all over the world. Brexit for us actually isn't going to have a huge impact, because if we come out of the EU, then we can start moving products between Turkey and the UK much more easily. So for our particular business, which is, you know, centered around a huge Turkish manufacturing environment together with a UK manufacturing environment, you know, Europe is going to miss out on the opportunities that we'll generate. Okay.
I was just thinking about this on the way here this morning. I was thinking, you know, is this a bit like the Millennium question? Do you remember, who remembers Millennium? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah? So people spent 2 years of their lives preparing for the 31st of December 1999, and nothing happened. And nobody can really work out whether nothing happened because people spent 2 years of their lives working to prepare, or whether actually there was never a problem there at all and it was all a figment of somebody's fear and hype. So I kind of think, well, Brexit could be a bit like this, actually. It could be a big deal, or it could be, I won't say no deal because that means something else, but it could be a big problem for us or not. And the question is, the thing is we don't know, but kind of instinctively one thinks, actually we need a plan, and we need to be prepare for a range of different scenarios, and that we better be working on that because, you know, whether something happens or not, actually, if we're working on the right things, they will put us in a strong position anyway to be more competitive in our markets. So I think this is a way to start looking at this problem, actually.
I'd also like to add to that. I think it's already, I mean, we've had 2 years of it being a big deal, because I think there was a cost estimated yesterday at the Tory party conference of the cost to date for Brexit for industry. So we can't really say if it is or not. It already is. Our currency is devalued after June 2016. That's good for export, but it's not so good if we're buying in products. So I think with 6 months to go, if businesses are still working on 2 or 3 scenarios, I believe there are 4 scenarios that are on the table as options. That also has a cost to business. So I think certainly from the businesses I talk to, we have issues with the uncertainty, the unknowing of what's going to happen, and that doesn't create a good platform for anybody. So I think we won't solve it today because hundreds of people are working 24/7 for the last 2 years to come up with a solution, and there isn't a viable solution that works for everybody.
I think I said earlier this morning, it's a VUCA world out there. Being a family business that's been going for hundreds of years, we've managed through world wars and regime change, huge geopolitical challenges, factories flooding, earthquakes. So I think when the point comes when we'll need to deal with the issues that present themselves through Brexit, I think we're an adaptable species. We'll work through it, I'm sure. So, a question.
Hi, my name's Tony Goodman. Uncertainty is the hardest thing to cope with Brexit at the moment. I completely agree. If we take an assumption that we leave without any deal, what do you see as the major implications both for importers and exporters?
So, a situation with no deal for importers and exporters. Nigel, do you want to?
Thanks, yeah. I guess, I view it, we're in the sort of Donald Rumsfeld area, aren't we? The knowns, the known knowns, known knowns, unknowns, all the rest of it. I would come back to the sort of known knowns, do work with what do you know today and how can you mitigate the risks? Currency is going to be one. So how can you maybe entangle yourself with your customers more to make sure they're going to come back to you even if there may be a further price disadvantage? On your supply chain, I'd probably say maybe don't get too entangled so they can't hold you over a barrel. So to me, I'd say the immediate thing will probably be some effect on the currency personally. The other things are longer term. It's not a one shot, this is a process. Things like labour, access, etc. I think will be longer term. But in the short term, the obvious hit will be shareholder prices and currency. How you mitigate against that, I'm not sure, but I would suggest just making sure you've got the right values in your product to keep those customers even through the shocks and not be too vulnerable to the supply chain when the shocks happen as well.
Yeah, I think, if I can just say, actually, all your customers based in the UK are going to be in the same position. So the question really is, how well are you going to be able to compete in this new environment relative to everybody else who's going to face exactly the same challenges? And are you better prepared and able to adapt to the new environment or worse than your major competitors? So I think that's the question. And then there is the short-term thing, as you say, you know, there's going to be a massive transition issue, but then actually you don't, if you get through that and stay in business through that, then it's about how you are developing and shaping your business to succeed in the longer term, right? And as you say, is it currency, so that affects costs? Is it logistics, because you import a lot of materials? Is it labor? What are the risks in your business or the challenges to you to be a thriving and successful business going into the future when those things may change? That equation may well change.
Okay, got another question.
Hi.
Hello.
You can hear me all right. So I'm Kizzy from Kettle Foods again. Sorry, I've already asked a question.
That's okay.
So like Pladis, Kettle are a local business but operating in international markets, although admittedly to a much smaller scale than your business. I'm really intrigued, actually, for all of you, how you would take advantage of the kind of British sentiment and the value of local, whilst also avoiding alienating some of our international friends, particularly when we're trading abroad. So I'm really keen to hear that from both an innovation point of view and a general business management point of view.
Okay, so British brands at the moment are very popular around the world. So we have a number of brands that we operate globally. One of them is the McVitie's brand. One of them is Godiva, the chocolate brand. And the other global brand that we have is Ülker, which is a European brand which stretches from Turkey right the way across the Middle East, Russia, Kazakh, all the stans, etc. And it's making use of the products that we manufacture in accordance with those brands. So we will produce products in any one of our 34 countries, and we will sell it under the brand of relevance in the market that we operate in. So we would produce a product in Turkey, and if that product resonates with a UK consumer, we'll sell it under a McVitie's brand. If it resonates in the Middle East or the Far East, we'll sell it under an Ülker brand, which I'm sure most global businesses will do. But the value of the British brand is quite key, particularly in the Far East, Middle East, emerging economies, India, Nigeria, China, where people want to buy things that are perceived to be of good quality, and generally British brands are perceived in that way. So we have a great success. So for us, Brexit means, unfortunately, if we can't export from the UK, we can make the same products in Turkey, we can make it in Egypt, we can make it in Saudi Arabia or Kazakhstan, wherever it is that our manufacturing facilities allow us to. So that's from a business point of view. We're big enough and flexible enough and agile enough to be able to respond to a market. We have similar sorts of issues when the King of Saudi says we can only buy flour from one flour mill. Then that's the challenge we have. When the Nigerian government decides we can only use indigenous palm oil and completely takes over our supply chain for us, we have to respond to that. But from the point of view that you mentioned, otherwise, if one of my colleagues would like to respond.
Yeah, I think the example you used is quite interesting, because when you talk about British brands, you mean the value of what that brand represents and its ethics, its values, its how it resonates with the consumer. And obviously McVitie's, as an example, is a brilliant British brand. But if we're the problem we have as well with Brexit is that British brands are also global brands, so they are manufactured in lots of other countries. So making a British brand in another country is obviously perfectly acceptable. But one of the issues we have with Brexit, again, is manufacturing in this country and also local jobs, because there is a demand for local food, local produce, but it's by no means at a scale that we can actually feed ourselves or produce ourselves. And we're in a particularly strange time at the moment. Brexit has come at a time when retailing is changing from stores to online. We've got many, many new businesses that are changing. Uber is changing the transport industry. Airbnb is changing the hospitality, hotel B&B businesses. We've got supper clubs that people serve at home instead of restaurants. So people's jobs are also something that we have to really think about in a local context. So Brexit is the uncertainty it's creating. I don't personally feel is generating great consumer confidence, and I think that's really why the uncertainty globally is so difficult to manage at this time. And we do need to have some clarity about which way we're going to go, because 6 months down the line we'll be out of the European Union. We should already be making contingencies for whatever those 4 options are, and of course there's a cost to that too.
Just to add from a consumer point of view, Brexit is there and it has an impact. But besides that, if you look at the other trends, you're seeing provenance stories are quite key for consumers. At the same time, the most important thing is transparency. So whether you go with British brands or you make it more personalized for the market you're selling it in, it's very important. But make sure that there's a transparency of consumers. That's what consumers buys into, and that's what consumers value the most. So
And the world is getting much, much smaller. People are traveling around the world, and when they see a brand that they recognize, wherever it is in the world, they expect it to be absolutely the same as they recognize. And for us, we talked a lot this morning about allergens. Obviously, that's a very topical subject at the moment. Allergens and allergen control. Quite simply, the law of the land will not protect consumers, as it did not in the case of young Natasha. And when we look across the world, there isn't a sesame seed allergen risk in Turkey. So trying to establish allergen controls in different manufacturing environments that meet the same requirements as the consumer has are also an opportunity. They're always a challenge, but they're always an opportunity as well. Because if we can do it better than other people, then our brands will sustain. And that's the whole purpose of why we're here. We're here to make money. We just do it through making much better products than our competitors.
Just to add to that, in terms of while our products, when people are traveling, they expect the same things from our product when they do. But at the same time, the local community and local consumers have got much different expectations. So what we've tried to do is, for example, our brand Robinsons, which is quite popular it's one of the market leaders from a squash point of view in the UK. In Ireland, we've got a squash brand, which is My Vardy, which is more relates to the local consumers, but we also then put Robinsons in there so that the consumers have a choice of which ones they want to go to. So giving them a choice is also important.
I think one other challenge that we have as a global manufacturer with 26,000 employees and 4 billion consumers is migrant workforce. So we have a factory. If you get on the train to Euston, you'll pass the McVitie's factory at Harlesden. That workforce speaks 52 different languages in one factory, and you won't find a more diverse ethnic mix in, I don't think, any factory than you will in a factory in the UK, because I think we've got the most diverse and cosmopolitan population in the world. But what we have seen is that the profile of employees in our factories has changed over the years, certainly in my 30 years in this business. And at the moment, we're employing a lot of people from Eastern Europe. And when that supply changes, that workforce supply changes, the dynamic of the factory will change. And we are hoping that it doesn't affect our productivity, because our colleagues from Eastern Europe, Poland, Latvia, work hard. They're very bright, they're very intelligent, and they make our factory a very big success, as do our factories in Leicester, where we have a big Indian subcontinent population. Again, very, very good, very effective, and very well-maintained factories. So workforce is another challenge I think we're going to face. I'm just asking, because there were a number of people that said they were from manufacturing businesses. Do these challenges, these opportunities, resonate with you in your businesses as well? Are there any particular areas that you feel that you're perhaps not well thought of or well covered for your plans on Brexit? Looks like we're going to be okay. Okay, hiya, Uma.
I think the reality is the delay at borders. I think that's a really big unknown, and contingency planning around that is key. And whilst I'm not saying we've done it or we are doing it, because we'd be mad not to be. So there you go, you got your answer. But it's a real unknown. I mean, is there going to be a 70-mile queue? Is there going to be a 20-minute turnaround? What is it going to mean for us as businesses?
Yeah, for sure. Well, whenever we have problems, we usually end up air freighting somewhere, don't we? Yeah, indeed. Okay. Guys, feel free to just bounce around any questions. This opportunity is here for you to make use of as you see fit. If you've got any particular questions about global businesses or compliance or or consumer, then we've got people here that are willing to share their views and their thoughts, because you know we're all here. We don't know each other, but we know something about each other. We're here because we share a common, certainly work business relationship. So let's use the opportunity as best we can. Right, question.
Hi, yeah, my name is Phil Weatherston. I work for a startup tech company that specialises in consumer insights. You're saying that there's obviously potentially a lot more opportunity to export from Britain. I just want to know, and obviously open this out to the floor as well, how is everybody planning on trying to understand potentially unexplored markets, and especially for your specific businesses, and as well as understanding how consumers are potentially purchasing in these unexplored markets?
So there's lots of tools available at the minute that allows us to track consumer behaviors in terms of their continuous shopping habits, shopper experience kind of thing, that allows us to start to see the trend of consumers are becoming cost conscious, etc., or they're going to more towards health. So you do have some tools like continuous data, consumer segmentation kind of testing methods that allows us to track a lot of that.
If I could just add to that as well, if I may. So when United Biscuits began to explore an international opportunity, we started by looking at what consumers ate around the world. So you have to get out, you have to get to China or Japan or to the Far East, to the Middle East, and just observe cultures and behaviours. And then you can identify which products you think you might want to export. And that'll have a measure of success, and as you've already said, you need to be prepared for failure. You need to be recognising the fact that you might export products and they might not take off, they might not sell. You need to get price points right as well, because the living wage is very, very different around the world. So for us, you know, we need to hit a price point of 9 rupees in India, 12 naira in Nigeria. We know how much we can afford to charge for a product based on the fact that the population needs to be able to work for only 10 minutes to be able to afford it. So it's about economic drivers as well. Once you develop success in that environment, then you can start to put down manufacturing footprints around. And you can eventually, once you've established the market, and you then want to leverage your benefits to make the money you need to make, you put a manufacturing location down, and then you start to manufacture in that environment. Again, the challenges are with local raw materials, but if you've got a brand and you've got the resources to be able to do it, you can then start to manufacture out, and that's where we've ended up with, you know, McVitie's digestives being produced in Kazakhstan and the Punjab, you know. So it's about leveraging your scale and moving your business out according to what you understand. And I'll give you another good example. You know, we have a Godiva business which is based around different platforms. One of them is Godiva stores. So it's a chocolate experience. The chocolate experience product, the Godiva store, where you can go and, you know, meet a chocolatier and have your own products made, or eat ice creams or coffee or whatever it is. You know, that product was developed in the US. That product is now dying in the US because the footfall in American malls is down by another 30% this year. It's exploding in Japan, in China, in Dubai, the Middle East. So we have a complete role reversal. We've got a product that is not successful in one continent, in the West generally, which is massively successful in the East. So you can play tunes with the infrastructure and the opportunities that you already have by just redistributing your knowledge and experience.
Can I just ask? Sorry, did you mean in terms of how do you decide what to export or what you want to sell to consumers by customer insight? Okay.
You
Because
have
I
to
think
get out.
one of the things that is going to happen and is already happening is the emergence of big data and algorithms. And that has amazing consequences to everything we buy, because obviously everything is done by historic purchase in terms of what customer research, but done on a much more technical level. You would know, obviously. But it also means that if social media, they're picking up certain things that people are doing, it's much quicker. Trends are evolving much quicker, and that's one of the reasons why there's such a big disruption in the way that retail is happening globally. And as you say, there's different emerging markets. But it also means that if social media, for example, if I want to buy something, if I want to buy a McVitie's biscuit, for example, and the trend is that McVitie's biscuits in raspberry, no one's buying them, the algorithm will tell people that will actually probably stop being produced, because the market is generating a belief that raspberry biscuits are not there anymore. So I think there's also a requirement for always instinct, and people that know their businesses have that instinct. Because I think if we all think back, 2007 was the launch of the iPhone, and before that, none of us had smartphones. And actually, did any of us know we needed a smartphone? So how on earth do you get to produce 6 million in the first year of iPhones when you don't even know that there's a market there? So I think it's a very, very subtle way with innovation and consumer behavior and focus groups, but actually you'll all be in the business of instinctively knowing if a product is going to take off and trialing something, but using AI and algorithms is going to probably be the future, whether that's the best way, but it is the way that everyone's going.
Huma, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask that very question. Where does big data feature into it? So you've kind of answered that, but the only thing I would say, and it's hopefully a challenge that you'll recognise, I'm not sure instinctively we can do that anymore. It's really hard in some businesses to second guess what consumers are after, and it's that data, it's the algorithms, it's the big data. So I suppose the question back is, when you don't instinctively know, you've got to try it, and that kind of comes back to what you were talking about earlier, is when you try it, you can't try it as a big corporate anymore. I don't think that works. So what is the mixture of the insights, whether it's algorithm or going out and literally footfall around the area to see what people want? What's the right balance, and what kind of mindset do your employees need?
So this is Huma, again, a great concept for conversation. So when you're a brand, whether it be Coca-Cola or McVitie's, or iPhones, you can buy a phone for a lot less that makes a call and sends a text and gets you on the internet than an iPhone. Why do you buy an iPhone? It's about the emotional link that you have with the consumer. So you create a need, you create an emotional moment, and then you must never ever let that consumer down. So we create, if you didn't see my presentation at 10 o'clock this morning, you'll hear about the fact that, we talk about our founder. We're a family business. We're a £17 billion family business. And it's about making a connection with the consumer. And our purpose is to bring happiness to the world. So whether you want to tell someone that you care about how much you care about them by buying them a box of Godiva chocolates, or whether you've just had a bad day, the world's let you down, your husband's gone out or done whatever they do, husbands, etc., and you just want a moment to yourself, you then think, right, I'm going to have myself a chocolate biscuit or whatever it may be. That's the moment when the brand cannot let you down. You have to be there, because the world, is a disappointment, but we cannot be. So it's about making that emotional link. And I think you can do that. You can create that. You can create that emotional link, and you can also create brand loyalty by the way that you resonate with the consumers. And I think that transcends Brexit.
I'd just like to say, though, in answer to your question, if I knew the answer, I'd be a billionaire. So.
Okay. So,
from the University of Stirling. My research interest is mainly in translation studies. So my question will be something related, a minor detail, what you trying to expand your business in the world. So what will be interesting in while you're expanding, for example, the UK brand internationally, for example, in the country in China, how would your company ensure by providing adequate or accurate, precisely translated food labels, for example?
It's very. It's difficult if you're trying to do it from the UK. It's not just that; it's legislation as well. So Chinese food safety law is very different to UK food safety law, and in some cases, much tougher. So there are tougher standards tougher hurdles to overcome to be able to sell products in China, because China's got a different environment. There are professional shoppers in China that will actually go and look for brands. They'll look for faults, they'll look for defects in packaging, labeling, in pronunciation, in spelling, in coding, the origin of coding, and look for that as an opportunity. So it's not just translation, it's being aware of the consumer and the marketplace. And by the way, you know, the consumer in China is very different as well. They will get in their car. Before they get in their car, they'll order themselves their food, and it will arrive at their home at the same time they do. And they do the same thing with a packet of biscuits. So if they want a packet of digestives, they order it on the internet. You know, we deal with some people in our colleagues in China who haven't been to a shop for 2 years. So it's not just about language, but the simple fact is you make sure that you employ people who understand the region. So our Chinese team is Chinese. Our Nigerian team are Nigerian. Our Saudi Arabian team are Saudi Arabian. And that's as simple as that.
So you have different teams for different, for example,
Yeah,
with different
we're an international business, and we employ people based on the region that we work in. We will move people backwards and forwards, so we have quite a few of our colleagues from Turkey working in the UK. We've got people from the UK working in Nigeria or the US or China or wherever it may be. But predominantly, wherever a business operates, my recommendation is always that it operates with a core of experts or people that understand the market and understand legislation and understand, you know, in the Middle East we call it bashish, you know, gateways through to being able to do business, because it's not always fair and legal. So you have to operate, you have to understand that dynamic as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think Tracy, are we okay to wrap the session up now and let you guys get away for some lunch? Thank you very much for your time and attention, for some of the wonderful presentations. I certainly could sit here all day and listen to some of those, so thank you very much. And